I wanted to make my own show from my own imagination and not be influenced. But also, I just don't like to cook.
This is the Listening Books Podcast. I'm Jessica Stone, and today's guest is Bonnie Garmus, author of Lessons in Chemistry. The best-selling novel has recently been adapted to a television miniseries starring Brie Larson, and it's about a chemist named Elizabeth Zott, who becomes the host of a cooking show in the 1960s. In this conversation, Bonnie tells us about how her career as a copywriter shaped her approach to writing the novel, the one mispronunciation in the audiobook, and why she needed to break some rules to write this story. Bonnie, I want to thank you again for making time for me, for Listening Books. I know you have an incredibly busy schedule, and in no small part to the success of Lessons in Chemistry, which has just been such a huge phenomenon. And from what I understand, you actually do have a good origin story for this book.
Yeah, I had a really bad mood. The thing that made me decide to write the book, I had a bad day at work, and it was so bad that I ended up not working, but writing the first chapter of Lessons in Chemistry after a meeting I'd been in where I'd been, I faced the usual sexism that women still continue to face today, but they took it up a notch that day, and so did I.
And thus Elizabeth Zott was born. Although I think I read that she started off as a minor character in another novel that you had been writing. Is that right?
Yes, that was a novel I'd never finished. It was way long ago, and she had been in that novel. She was only 3 sentences long in that novel. I knew that she was a chemist and that she was depressed and that she had a cooking show. I managed to cram all of that in 3 sentences in this other book that never went, I never finished. But that day at work, she came zooming back to me, and it had been well over a decade since I thought about her. So it was very strange, but I really felt like she just showed up and she had a lot to say.
Yeah. Lessons in Chemistry is so popular that most of my friends have read it. So when I said I would get to interview you, they were really excited. And one of them wanted me to ask if, in your mind, any of your characters were on the autism spectrum.
Oh, I get that question a lot, and it's one of my most favorite questions, so I'm always glad when somebody asks it. Elizabeth Zott is not on the spectrum, in my view. I based her on the tenets of Stoicism as written by Marcus Aurelius, and I love the fact that we can see that people on the spectrum are actually Stoics, and the definition of a Stoic is somebody who takes responsibility for themselves, speaks with logic, is able to speak up and speak out when they need to, and may not fit into what we think of as polite society, but we need more of them, not less of them. And so I'm always delighted when people on the spectrum see themselves in this character because, to me, she represents the best in people. And I think so many times people on the spectrum are put down, or people say, oh, they're on the spectrum, or like it's this problem, when in fact some of the most brilliant people in the world have been on the spectrum. So for me, I have several friends who are autistic and are on the spectrum, and I did a Zoom group with an entire group of autistic adults, and we had one of the best discussions ever. So I'm really pleased when people on the spectrum see themselves in her.
That's wonderful and an unexpected answer. That's really interesting. Now, a reader favorite tends to be the dog named 630. I wonder if you can say a little about what his importance to the story is from a writer's perspective. What does he do for the story?
Well, I really wanted to include a perspective from a dog, because most people like dogs. We're all familiar with dogs. We're all familiar with their habits. But what we tend to overlook is that the animal kingdom has a lot, we have a lot of impact on them, on other species. And we sometimes forget the impact that they should have on us. They've survived, most of them have survived longer than we have on Earth. And so it's really important, I think, to get that animal perspective on the stupid things we do every day and what they might think about it. And that's why I wrote 630, because I had a very smart dog that I had underestimated. And it turned out, I think, she was sort of this mixture between Gandhi and Einstein. And she'd come from a shelter. She'd been horribly abused. She wasn't a purebred, she wasn't attractive. Plus, she smelled bad her whole life. But she had, I know she really did smell bad. She had this presence about her, and her intellect was really superior. It was really something to see. Her facility with language that she could understand, and her empathy for other animals and for humans was really something that I've never forgotten. And it occurred to me that, we so often judge intelligence by human terms, but that's only one way to judge intelligence. And our definition of intelligence is so incredibly narrow that it forgets that animals have powers way beyond ours, including sense of smell and touch and taste and all these other things. Especially dogs can hear a lot better than we can. I read that a bloodhound has their sense of smell is 300,000 times stronger than ours.
Wow.
That is a superpower. And if any of us could do that, it would be, we would be considered, outlandishly talented, but we just take it for granted in dogs. Dogs can sniff cancer and things like that. We can't do that.
Yeah. I'm just imagining how unpleasant it would be to be able to smell that well.
My God, that's a really good point. Yeah, can you imagine? Although there they are, their nose is buried in other dogs' urine and things. They just love it.
You were talking about how rational Elizabeth is, and that I want to pick up on that with this question, which bear with me because I feel like the lead up to it is a little bit long, but she's an extraordinary character, literally extraordinary, whose cooking show treats ordinary women and their responsibilities with a great deal of dignity and seriousness. But she herself is written as quite exceptional to the norm. She's beautiful, but she's unconcerned with beauty. She's not vain. She's brilliant. She's sort of defined by this pure rationalism, which is in stark contrast to, I think, a still very pervasive assumption about women that they're more emotional than men. And what I wonder is, were you ever concerned with the balance between rejecting the stereotype, but also not falling into the, not like other girls trope, which kind of ends up implying that the default for the gender is inferior? Was that something you struggled with or?
I thought about it. I considered it pretty deeply. It was, originally Elizabeth Zott was not beautiful. She was plain. And as I was writing it, I realized how foolish that was. Because one, if I made her beautiful, her problems would just escalate. All the men at work would hit on her. As it turns out, there are studies that say that beautiful women are considered less intelligent. So she would have to also surmount that. But not only that, the big thing was they would have never put her on television. It would not have been plausible that they would have hired her with no experience to be on television unless she looked like the way she did.
Yeah, that makes sense. From what I've read, you and your agent, Felicity Blunt, did a whole lot of editing and restructuring before it was even sent out to editors. I'm curious, was that just the beginning of the editing process, or did you have it in such good shape by that point that there was very little left for them to do?
There's very little left, to be honest. But also, I wouldn't say that we did these major things that you're talking about with me and Felicity.
Oh, okay.
I did do a lot for Felicity. It was not a restructuring at all. Structure is a thing that I worry about the most. And so I would not have restructured the book. What she did instead was say, I think we need more of the kid. A lot of people think, editors or agents write all over your manuscript. They do not do that. They don't get in there and start rewriting. I won't accept anybody rewriting on my own document, actually. I've been a writer for 30 years. I'm not a beginner. But what I really loved about Felicity is that she could look at it and say, I think we need more of the kid. I think we need this, blah, blah, blah. We didn't agree on everything. And that is okay. And the thing that other writers have to know is that you can't just go, okay, I have to do this because my agent says this or my editor says this. This is your book. This is your dream. This are your ideas. And combined with my experience, and I've written for a lot of people for a very long period of time, and it's creative writing, I knew what I had to do. So sometimes Felicity and I would lock horns, but this is the great thing about her. That is exactly what you want in an agent. So she was torturing me a little bit. Well, I think we should not, this dog, I don't really like the dog. And you have to be able to defend what you're doing. And I think I can do that. But I will say, I just love having her opinion on everything because she is someone I can say, what about this? And she'll go, ugh, I don't think so. She doesn't pull any punches, and that's what I like.
Yeah, yeah. Were there any rules, like traditional rules, that you felt like you were breaking in writing lessons in chemistry?
Yeah, most of them. This is the joy of Felicity Blunt, because I guarantee you that there are very, very few agents who would feel compelled to sign a book that has 10 different points of view, and one of them is from a dog. Having different points of view, that many, is already breaking every rule in the book. But then to combine them within a chapter, within a sentence, on the same page is considered a big no-no. And I just don't care about writing rules. I come from a different world where you're supposed to break the rules, where you're supposed to be disruptive, where you're supposed to do new things. And so I just ignore anybody who says, you can't do that. Because I think I can only not do that if I do it badly. And if I do it badly, then I deserve to be pommeled a little bit. But we always have to go out on a limb. We always have to explore new things. The character is a subversive character. The writing had to match her character. And so you cannot just have chapter one, linear, one point of view, or the standard idea of how you might present a novel. And those other approaches definitely work, but they would not have worked for this book. That's why, Felicity, she's like, yeah, I like that. I thought very few people would have said that.
Mm. And why was it important to be able to switch points of view even within a chapter or within a sentence? What was that giving to you for the book?
Well, I think what I'm always doing when I'm writing, I only think of one person, and that's the reader. I don't write for myself. I have been trained to always write for other people and always consider what they're thinking, what kind of day they've had, and then try to provide something to them that they will find entertaining, but also with substance. And so when I was changing points of view like that, my idea was that all of these points of view were going to be rounding out one woman, Elizabeth Zott. We see her from 10 different points of view. That's why she's so big. But my other idea, the central idea of the book, is that she is a catalyst, because she's a chemist, but she is the catalyst of the book. So every single person or dog she comes in contact with, she changes. She herself does not really change very much. Everybody else changes when they meet her or when she's had time to remold them.
Is that another rule that's broken, that she herself doesn't change much?
Yeah. I think people always say, and then the protagonist has to go through this great change. But Elizabeth Zott started as a chemist. That's all she wanted to do. And she ends as a chemist.
Let's talk for a moment about the audiobook version, which was narrated by Miranda Raisin. What was the casting process like from your end? And were there qualities you wanted in a reader specific to this book?
Well, they sent me 4 different demo tapes of various actresses reading. And when I heard Miranda's, I knew hers was the right one. To be completely honest, I've never listened to the audiobook because I can't even open the book without wanting to change it. But I really respected her voice. And, she did a pretty good American accent because she's British. And the funny thing about the audio is that she mispronounces one name, Jack. She calls him Jack LaLanne, and he's Jack LaLanne. And every American knows that. So it's without fail, every American will say, I love this American who read the book, but she says Jack LaLanne's name wrong. And I know she's British.
Oh.
Give her a break. But I thought she did a great job, and people just love the audiobook.
Yeah, I enjoyed her narration tremendously. Were there any back and forths between you? Any questions or?
She asked me how to pronounce one name, but that I never thought of Jack LaLanne because I grew up with Jack LaLanne on TV. I just thought everyone knew as Jack LaLanne. We never discussed that one, and no, she was really hands-on. She just got it done, and I just thought, wow, she did a really, really good job, and I'm really grateful to her. But no, we had no back and forth at all. That's how good her demo tape was. That's what I want to say.
That must have been good. Do you ever listen to audiobooks yourself?
I do, but rarely, honestly, because I'm the kind of person who needs to sit, and I so rarely do things that would allow me to listen to an audiobook. Like my neighbor in Seattle always she listened to my book while she was gardening, but I don't have a garden in London. So there are very few times where I'm not totally engaged with what I'm doing that I can listen to. I can't even listen to podcasts half the time. I'm so far behind in the world. It's embarrassing. But I did listen to, I started the audiobook because I wanted to hear Meryl Streep read Tom Lake by Ann Patchett.
Yes.
And I really love the way she did that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
My mom was listening to that and telling me how good it was.
Yeah, I think it's really, really well done.
So going from audiobook maybe to the television series, which Apple TV picked up, and I believe it's going to be released. I think the 13th of October is the release date. Have you had much involvement with that adaptation? And are there any significant changes that you're aware of?
Oh, yeah. I have not had any involvement, really. I did read the scripts, but only at the very last, really 2 weeks before filming, I got a chance to read the scripts. And our deal was that I could read the scripts and make notes, and they had every right in the world to throw every note I wrote out the window. And I think that that's fair. I think that's fair because you have to allow creative people, sorry about that, you have to allow creative people their own medium and their own experience. Everybody interprets the book in different ways. So yes, there's a lot of changes, but between the book and the series, but that's what an adaptation is. And so I have only seen a rough cut from quite a while ago, and I know it went back to editing. So honestly, I don't know. I haven't seen it either.
Right.
I saw a very rough cut. And so we'll just wait and see. But yes, people should not expect, oh, it's going to be just like the book, because they just don't do that. And there's a reason for that, not only because it's another medium, but because they have to make sure they can get it all in 8 episodes. And so they cut a whole bunch of stuff. They might add new subplots. They do all sorts of things. And you just have to kind of leave it up to them. I got great advice when I signed over the rights to aggregate film to make it into a TV series, which is that I did want to work on it, by the way. I did say, hey, I would like to be one of the writers on this. And it was hilarious at the time because my book hadn't come out yet. And my agents and editors were saying, you cannot work on the series. You're going to be really busy. And I said, doing what? I had no idea how much promotion there would be for lessons in chemistry. It's more than a full-time job. So it was really dumb of me, but it was really, they were very kind and like, yeah, you're going to be busy. So I didn't do anything on it. I wasn't invited to do anything on it anyway, but I think, the advice I got from 3 different writers who have had their work adapted for the screen is that you hand over your manuscript and then you run in the other direction. Because I wouldn't have the strength to go, yeah, we don't need this old scene anymore. They had to do that. And I think that is their job, and it's also their right.
Yeah. That seems like a healthy perspective to have.
Yeah, yeah.
Were there any changes that you noticed that actually interested you? Like, oh, that's a good idea?
I'm really fond of episode 1. They put in this scene that I really liked, that I would have never thought of, where they have a Miss Hastings beauty pageant and they make Elizabeth participate. And I think it's done super well.
Yeah, that does sound great. I'm looking forward to watching it now. I hope you're enjoying this conversation with author Bonnie Garmus. We've got more to come right after this message from Listening Books patron Stephen Fry.
Hello, I'm here to tell you about the wonderful audiobook charity, Listening Books. If you or someone you know finds that your illness, disability, learning difficulty, or mental health condition impacts on your ability to read the written word or to hold a book, then Listening Books could be for you. They have over 10,000 audiobooks in the collection, from fantastic fiction to fascinating non-fiction, compelling autobiographies and best-selling novels. You can find books for children and adults alike, with titles read by the most brilliant narrators, including me, Stephen Fry. A whole year's access to Listening Books costs just £20, with completely free memberships available if you find this fee a barrier to joining the service. So, go on, visit their website and join today at www.listeningbooksorg.uk/pod.
You know, I don't watch cooking shows. I don't even like to cook. And so I know, I mean, I am not a chemist, not a scientist. I don't like to cook. Why am I writing this book? But that's the beauty of my background at copywriting. We always write what we don't know. And so I have spent a career learning all new things all the time. And I'm really lucky and grateful to have had that career. So when I decided to take on this book, and I thought, how hard can it be to write about cooking? Not that hard. How hard can it be to write about 1950s chemistry? An absolute nightmare. I had to learn it for myself from a textbook from the 50s. You can't Google old science very well. And so that did turn out to be a lot more work than I thought. But honestly, it's so funny. People say, you know, what TV shows did you watch in order to get the feel for a cooking show? Well, I watched 0 because I wanted to make my own show from my own imagination and not be influenced. But also, I just don't like to cook. I try. You know, BBC Food is coming here tomorrow to tape me making those brownies in the book. And it's so funny because I said, they're doing this special on me, My Life in 5 Dishes, which is such an honor. I'm really looking forward to this, actually. But when I said, you know, I don't really like to cook, they were just astonished. And I think that is the power of writing. I can convince somebody I know something about cooking. That's just a miracle.
Lessons in Chemistry, it made a big splash even before it was published. There was fiercely contested 16 publisher auction back in, I think it was 2020, which of course Doubleday won. And then the next thing you know, you've got Apple TV's picked it up for a straight to series order. You've got Brie Larson starring and executive producing. So by the time the book was actually published last year, there was already a lot of momentum behind it, which absolutely did not fizzle. All of this to say, was there a single moment during all this when you realized this was going to be huge?
You know, I've been in a state of shock, honestly, because, you know, I wrote another book that never went anywhere. I got 98 rejections. And I started this one because I was in a bad mood. What are the odds? And then I thought, well, I mean, even Felicity, this is yet another thing I absolutely love about her. But the night before she was going to introduce the book at Frankfurt, she called me and she said, look, you and I like this book, but it's pretty quirky. So I don't want you to get your hopes up, because a lot of agents take books to Frankfurt and they don't get any notice, nothing. And, you know, we like it. But again, It's pretty quirky. And she called me 24 hours later and she goes, cancel everything I just said. It was the greatest thing, we were both so surprised, and I think that lowering of expectations was really important, really smart on her part. And then we've continued to be surprised. And what I really love is how many people have come to the book through different channels. I talk a lot with young people who are reading the book. Young teenage boys actually are a really big growing audience for me.
Oh, wow. That's great to hear.
Yeah. It's been assigned to a lot of schools. A lot of curriculum are now including it. And I really appreciate that because as one young man said to me, the dean of his school said, you have to learn about sexism. I mean, really, this book is set in the 60s, but everything you're going to read is still true. And you have to really think about how you're treating your female classmates because they're not different from you. You are not superior to them. And that really meant a lot. And so I get the best direct messages from these teenage boys reading the book. And it's hilarious. But I also get a lot from young women, especially young women in science who are finding that they're still facing the same battles that their grandmothers, their mothers faced. And that's been, I think it's been this wake-up call for everyone. So in terms of the popularity, though, I should just say I didn't ever see it coming. And sometimes, for a long time, especially when I was going through the auction and through the TV series thing, which just seemed bizarre. When you have Brie Larson call you up on Zoom and it's just you and her, and she says, I want to executive produce your book and I want to be Elizabeth Zott, just think, is this really happening? But one night, I used to do this thing all the time where I would get up in the middle of the night because I do have a pretty good imagination. I'd get up in the middle of the night and I would just assume I'd imagine the entire thing. And I would go check my email to see if I had imagined it. And one night, I just remember this so clearly. My husband grabbed my wrist as I was getting out of bed and he pulled me back down and he said, let me save you a trip. It's real. So I guess he was tired of me going back and forth. But yeah, now I'm more accustomed to it, but it's still just a shock to hear from people all over the world, that so many people find themselves in the book.
Have there been any drawbacks to the success?
Well, I'm a very private person. And so loss of privacy is a big one for me. And here's hilariously, I thought, well, after I finish this book, I will have the freedom to start another book. And wow, I won't have to work as a copywriter. I can just write. No. The promo has taken up every inch of my day. I can't believe I thought I was going to help out on the series. So I think that's really the only drawback is that I didn't have all the time I thought I was going to have. But you know what? I'm grateful for every part of this. There is nothing about this process that I would change or try to make better because I'm in I know it's a hallowed space and I'll never take it for granted.
This other book that you'd like to work on if Lessons in Chemistry promo would ever give you the time, are you maybe able to go back to some of the work that you had written before and rework it? Or
well, I did go back to my first original book and I borrowed two of the themes from that book that I think are really important themes for people. And so those are being included in my new book. But otherwise, no, I realize this about myself. I will outgrow a project and then I don't want to go back because I'm outgrown it. It's just like, new clothes or whatever. I want something new. So I did include these two themes that are important to me, but I've reworked them quite a bit. And I like working on that when I get a chance.
You've mentioned your career as a copywriter a number of times, and I'm just wondering, was there anything about the publishing industry that surprised you that you were not accustomed to with copywriting?
Oh, yeah. Publishing moves slower than an iceberg. I've never seen an industry that's moved slower in my life. And this isn't really fair for me to say, but I came from industries that are moving at the speed of light. I was mostly working in technology where, every day you're just moving along. And that's not true in publishing. It is so slow. When they told me, I finished the book and I met all my deadlines way ahead of time because, let's go. And then they said, and now it will be 18 more months until it comes out. And I thought, what are you people doing? And of course, what it is they're, getting it reviewed. They're getting it sent out, to Goodreads and readers, and they're getting all these other things. And then you have to give all those people time to read and reflect on it and decide if they like it or not. So there's a lot of hidden stuff about publishing that I really didn't realize, and I had to come up to speed on. From the outside, though, it's so funny because people say, oh, it must have been in very bad shape if they needed 18 months. And I said, no, that's every writer goes, yeah, it's 18 months. You just want to die because you're done and you want to move on. But then there's all this pre-promo that you have to do that takes an incredible amount of time. So it was all a huge surprise to me. I do think there are parts that could be sped up, but I say that without really knowing what would have to change.
Let's end with this. When you get time, which must be scarce these days, when you get time to read purely for pleasure and not just for research for your next book, what do you like to read? And do you have anything that you'd like to recommend?
Yeah, my favorite thing is to read literature. So I like literary novels. That's what I always go for. But I read a ton of nonfiction. And I just finished an incredible book that will be out next year, which is not fair, right? Because all I do is get ARCs these days, advanced reader copies. So I recommend these books that won't be out because it's the glacial pace of publishing. But this one I just finished, and it's nonfiction. And it's called Chasing Hope by Kristof. He's a journalist for the New York Times. It was the most inspiring book I've read in 10 years.
Oh, wow.
It's really good. So, I rarely read memoirs, but that one, it's just absolutely incredible what a foreign journalist does. And I got to learn about it, through his book and his insights. But there's so much hope in this book that it made it a really worthwhile read. But the last book I absolutely loved, fiction, was Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, who I personally think is some sort of literary goddess. And I love what she does. But that book, that's right up there with the Poisonwood Bible for me. Both were just incredible.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. I really enjoyed that book as well. And
yeah.
Well, it's always nice when you hear other people enjoying a book that you've always loved. But sometimes I think because she's got quite a, I guess some might call it didactic or, because she has a strong moral center to her books in a way that obviously reminds you of Dickens, of course. But also I was reminded of like Steinbeck with Grapes of Wrath and whatever, just this singing indignation.
Yeah.
At those responsible for terrible things, and that's not everybody's cup of tea. I think.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean because one of my struggles is I don't want to write something that is super depressing for people. I mean, let's face it, Lessons in Chemistry is just chock full of dark moments. I just stuff them in there, but I try to balance them with lightness. Because I do think every day of the person coming home on the tube or coming home from work and not wanting more troubles on their plate, but wanting to be left at the end of the day with some kind of hope and hopefully with some laughter. That said, though, I love Barbara Kingsolver and I bow down to her.
As do we all. Well, I join you in the bow anyway. Bonnie, thank you so much again for your time. It's been a delight to get to chat with you. And I can't wait to share this conversation with all these friends of mine who've read the book and laughed at it and resonated with the main character. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jessica. I really appreciate it.
And thank you very much for listening. Lessons in Chemistry is available at your favourite bookshops and libraries. And of course, if you're a Listening Books member, you can find the audiobook in our collection as well. You'll also find Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead, which, in addition to being a favourite of Bonnie's, is also one of the nominees for this year's Members' Choice Awards. Voting is now open, so if you're a Listening Books member and would like to cast your vote for the best audiobook of 2023, visit listening-books.org.uk/extra/members-choice-award. You have until the 30th of November to cast your vote. Stephen Fry will announce the winner in January. Meanwhile, I'll be back next week. That's right, that's next week, not month, with actor and audiobook narrator Polly Lee, who will talk to us about what it was like to voice the many, many characters of the School for Good and Evil series. This podcast is produced by Listening Books, a UK charity that provides an audiobook lending service for over 115,000 members who find that an illness, disability, learning difficulty, or mental health condition affects their ability to read the printed word or hold a book. It's simple to join. For more information, head to our website www.listening-books.org.uk.